Hello, everyone. Welcome to our presentation today, Preparing to Deposit Your Thesis Q&A. I would just like to make some introductions as there are three panelists on the call. My name is Andrea Schweitzer. I'm the Research Services Librarian at the University of Manitoba here. And joined with me today is Wendy Prestonty. She's the MSpace assistant. Wendy, if you want to just say hello.
Hi, everyone.
There you go. And Sean Kalanick, he is our developer for MSpace. Sean, if you want to say hello.
Hello.
So our presentation today is going to be, and I first want to thank all of you who responded with your questions that we are going to address today in this presentation. It was very helpful. We weren't sure quite how we should put our presentation together. So thanks to your questions, we're really hoping that this will be very relevant to you, and we're anticipating some follow-up to what we have today. So we look forward to engaging with you later on. So let's get started. So just this first caveat here, we'll only be addressing thesis publication related issues in MSpace. Anything regarding the process of thesis, including timelines and milestones, really should be addressed to the Faculty of Graduate Studies program assistants. And I know some of them are on the call today, which is terrific. And so as we get into the open forum part of this presentation, we look forward maybe to hearing from them. So we'll talk to you soon. And so on that note, we've provided a couple of links regarding those resources that FGS has made available. And so if you're not familiar with them, here they are. And I have to say the new website is very nice in terms of laying out these resources and sort of walking through. And so with regards to the library side, that information can be actually found in the submission of your thesis section of the FGS website, which is here. And so I'm just going to click it open right now. And as you scroll down, here's the timelines here. And they're nicely up to date. And then the instructions on how to submit your thesis for sort of to FGS, and then moving through that instructions, and then towards the bottom of the page, or I guess it's probably 2/3 down the page, is the instructions regards to submitting your thesis or practicum to the MSpace digital repository. Now, some of this information requires some updating. So what we've done is actually created some screenshots, and we've sort of provided some of that in our presentation today. And hopefully we'll provide that information to FGS in the near future so that they can make those amendments on the web page. So on that note, you'll see here regarding the instructions to submitting your thesis to MSpace Digital Repository. So the one thing that we'll just point out is we need to update the videos in regards to depositing MSpace in the graduate help section of the library resources. So we'll be doing that after this presentation today. In particular, what it does show is the older version of a copyright statement, and we'll be actually walking through the new one that those of you on the call today probably may not have seen, or certainly probably won't experience it because you're in the midst of submitting your thesis yourselves. And here is the copyright statement. So I'm just going to take an opportunity to sort of walk through the major pieces that is pertinent to you. So as you can see here, you'll put in your name, and the item that I'm going to actually bring your attention to is bullet number 6. Now, it's not numbered 6, but it is the following. The effective date of this license will be the date that the thesis practicum is submitted to the university. In exceptional cases where adequate cause can be shown to delay reproduction and copying of the thesis practicum, a request may be made to the Dean of Graduate Studies to restrict reproduction and copying of the thesis practicum for the period of 1 year after its submission, and the Dean, in consultation with the student's advisor, shall determine the period of restriction, if any. One final point that I'll sort of highlight is the bullet above that. All reproductions and copies made under the authority of this license shall bear a statement to the effect that the work is protected by copyright. The copyright statement then goes on to state around infringement declaration. So this is essentially saying that you assure that you have made all reasonable attempts, that all content contained in your thesis has been addressed in terms of any copyright related concerns. So, i.e., you have obtained permission when required to use any materials as part of your thesis that were obtained through a third party. And that you will then check that box to say, yes, I have done this, and yes, I agree to the terms and conditions as laid out in the license. Okay, so I'm just going to proceed then. We will be talking about copyright later on. So the reason why we bring this up is just to make you aware that this has changed from an older version of the copyright statement, and sort of direct back to this when we talk about some questions that come up in related to the copyright. So here's again a screenshot of the submission process as laid out, and the expectations, sort of pre-preparation requirements of your thesis prior to deposit. So when you actually go to deposit, you will log in with your UMnet ID at myumanitoba.ca. You will be submitting the electronic version of your thesis in a PDF. And you can see here that it'll be a single unsecured PDF file. And if you're having challenges creating a PDF document, you can contact Wendy and she will provide you assistance. And so the rest of these steps here are fairly straightforward, but again, if you have any questions, Wendy is able to help you. And in terms of other things that you need to have done prior to your submission is to ensure that you have the appropriate metadata available to you. So that means that includes your advisors' names and their affiliations, a copy of your abstract, and some key subject words related to your thesis or practicum. And in part or all of your thesis was previously published, have citations to those publications on hand as well. So just a couple of pieces about that. So in times past, we sort of allowed all content related to a thesis to be deposited as supplemental files to that thesis when you were submitting it. However, we are undergoing some sort of changes with regards to MSpace and developing some sort of content parameters. So to that end, we ask that data sets, software, coding, and maps, if you are interested in making those open or publish them, that you consult with either your liaison librarian or myself in terms of investigating repositories that would be appropriate to submit that data to. So, for example, data sets could be deposited in the UN Dataverse. There are repositories that take software, there are repositories that take code, and we also have a GIS data hub coming online that could be a potential home, but then there are also other GIS related repositories where one could deposit maps. So what you would do is you would deposit those materials there, you would get a citation, and then you would include that citation in your thesis prior to submission. So at this time, we are going to switch presenters, and Sean's going to now present with a live demonstration of MSpace. Take it away, Sean.
Hi, everyone. To start, I'm going to make one key point here about when you actually submit your thesis to MSpace, you're going to use the production mspace.lib.umanitoba.ca. For the purposes of this demo, I'm going to use the development copy, haven't had enough of that. This will just allow me to demonstrate without annoying all the program advisors with emails. So step number one, when you get to the website, is you can actually do this anytime. You don't have to wait until you're ready to submit your thesis. You can sign in and you can use your normal University of Manitoba credentials. So the first thing you would do is go up to this menu. It's kind of your go-to menu for everything. You can click submit to MSpace. And since I haven't logged in yet, it'll ask you to log in. What you need to do is make sure you click this first link here, which is going to log you into using your normal U of M credentials. And there's a note here about a format change. It's been in place for a while, but as Andrea had pointed out earlier, your login is UMNet ID at myumanitoba.ca if you're a student. Since I'm staff, mine looks a little different. As you can see, it's first name, or sorry, first name dot last name. So I'm just going to log in now. When you log in with your credentials, if you haven't logged in before, it will create an account for you. So I'll just sign in here. And the first thing you'll see is a few links on this page. The key one that you want for submitting a thesis is this item here at the top. And you select it and it'll open up and it'll show you a bunch of information that you should read thoroughly and plan ahead before you start. There's obviously a lot to prepare before you get to this point. But if you feel like you're ready and you've got everything ready to go, then you can click on this link down here, which is start a new thesis practicum submission. So you click on that. And step number one is very important. You need to select which collection you're going to submit to. With regards to the embargo, the 12-month restricted period, if that is what has been approved, you would select restricted 1 year. In this case, I'm just going to select the public collection because there's going to be no restriction. Just a word of advice is that if you pick the wrong one to start, you can always stop and cancel and restart again. So don't worry about it if you get it wrong. So I'm just going to pick this first one here. And there's going to be a series of questions it's going to ask you. The very first one is whether your thesis is Manitoba related. Again, I don't know all the details about what qualifies or not, so it's best to talk to your supervisors and advisors. I'm not going to check this box, but if your thesis was Manitoba related, you could check that box and continue. Each step has a next button, and at any point you can save and exit if you want to come back to it later. So I'll just go next here. Very first item on what 2 pages for describing your thesis is you would enter your name. I'm going to just demonstrate some things here very simply is you can just enter your detail. And let's say you've never used the system before. You would just simply type in your last name, first name. And if there's more authors, you can click add more. And you'll notice that this Steve Smith here has been added. There's one other option with regard to author identification. It's something called Orcid. Here's the website, just real quick. Andrew can give you way more details than I can about what it's all about, but essentially assigns an ID to researchers. And if you were to be registered in Orcid, you could use this feature to look up your name and add your identity. So I'm going to go in here and I've got one. So here's a couple of entries it searched for. One is that I was already in the system from a previous item from a long time ago. So that's just in MSpace. But the second one here is actually linked to my Orcid ID. And so I can actually select this and add this. And now it remembers my Orcid ID with my author name. So we do encourage you to get Orcid IDs if you can. So once you've added all your authors, you can go here, add your title. I'm just going to put in some simple data here. There is the primary title. Whatever language you need to enter it in is fine, accepts all different language characters. If there are alternate titles, you can add more than one alternate title. So I've added one other title. You want to add keywords that enhance your search. So again, this is just a test, so I'm going to add a couple here. Add as many as you feel you need to improve search. So there we've got 2. I'm sorry, I was on the wrong one. Let's read that one. My mistake. So then you get to the abstract. You got up to 350 words. I'm just going to add, something simple here. Make sure you put your full abstract in. You'll notice that some fields are marked with a red asterisk. Those are required. And if you attempt to go to the next step, it will show you an error and highlight what you have to fill in. Thesis date. I'm just going to put in one of the accepted formats here, which just happens to be today. You can enter citations. You can put multiples. I don't have any good examples with me, but you can add according to citation standards, and you can add many. And so I've got this first page filled out now. So I'm going to click next. And this next page is where you select your degree. So I'm just going to pick one of the longer ones here. And your department. And if there was ever any issue with you not seeing your degree or department in there, let us know right away, but they should all be in there. Then you're required to select your graduation date. So this would be, say, Feb 2021. Here you would enter your supervisors and departments. So I'm just going to put something simple in here real quick, but you would fill in all the details according to this example here. But again, if you need any help, you can contact Wendy or the program assistants or Andrew or even myself. There are examining committee members which are required. So I'm just going to put in something simple here again just to make it quick. You can add more committee members if you'd like. Guest members, if present, optional here. So I'm just going to skip this part. So that's your basic information you've entered. Now you would upload your file, and it's fairly easy to, once you've got your file prepared, I'm just going to choose a simple PDF here, my desktop. I'm going to open that. I'm going to make a recommendation to everybody. At this point, you could continue, but one thing I recommend is just, even though you're not going to add another file, perhaps, it's nice to click upload file and add another, because then what happens is it shows you the file that you've uploaded down here. So now you see it in your list and you're pretty sure it's been uploaded. At this point, you could choose more files and keep adding them. If you ever need to come back and delete a file that is in your submission, you can always come back to this point, which is the upload step. And you can go down to files uploaded and you can click this checkbox and say remove selected files. Sake of brevity, I'm not going to do that right now, but you can always contact support if you have any issues with that. And there have been some cases of 2 copies of theses files being uploaded. It may be a rare system error, I don't know, but if you ever have an issue with deleting a thesis file or any file, contact support immediately, and we'll help you out with that. So now I've uploaded my file, so I'm just going to click next. Here we're at the copyright declaration form. This is the new form that's integrated in with the steps. It used to be a separate web form. You don't have to fill out that separate web form anymore. And there are 3 items here. You're going to have to put in your student number. I'm just going to put in a silly student number here. Your name based on your login information is pre-filled for you, but you can change this if you'd like, if you want to shorten your name or change how you declare your name for such things. And definitely read everything thoroughly. And when you're comfortable with that, you would click on I agree. And then we'll click next. Then it gives you a chance to review everything, so we can go through the list. If you want to correct anything, you can always select correct one of these for the section, go back and change it. Looks like I'm good, so I'm going to click next here, my review. Here is the last step, which is the distribution license. Again, read thoroughly and understand what this means. I'm just going to grant the license because I have to if I want to complete, and then you complete your submission. And at that point, you would get an email that you had submitted, and the advisors will also get an email that there is a submission waiting, and you can go back to your submissions page, and you'll see now that my submission is being reviewed. And essentially, at this point, you wait until you're contacted, or if your submission is approved, you'll get an email that's approved. If it happens to be rejected, you will get a notice of that, in which case you can always come back to MSpace and go edit unfinished submission or see your recent activities. And then you would be able to select that item and fix any issues and then finish with the completion. Again, that process might take a few times depending if there are errors in the uploaded document or missing information. So I can demonstrate some of those aspects later if there's time, but I think I'll leave it at that, Andrea.
Okay, thanks, Sean. So Sean's just going to hand over the presentation back, and I'm going to start back from the slide, advance story through here. And we're going to get started on the questions. And so we've already received some questions in the question box, which is awesome. I really encourage all of you to, as we're going along now through the question and answer section up to the open forum, to please submit your questions in the question box. We'll be taking them in order that we receive them. And so don't be shy about using the question, and we're also monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions or comments or whatever, and you can certainly put them in the chat as well. So the first question that we've created here is what are the common issues that we've encountered in the submission to MSpace process? So Sean's already indicated the multiple copies issue. If you are requested to delete one of these copies and you can't, the email is here, and Sean will be on it to make sure that we can remove those duplications. And regarding the waiting period, Wendy, did you just want to turn your mic on and talk to this one briefly?
Yeah, so there will be a bit of a waiting period between the time that you submit your thesis to MSpace and the time that the Faculty of Graduate Studies checks and approves your thesis submission. And so during that time, if you go into MSpace and check, it'll say awaiting editor's attention. And that just means that it's in the submission pool awaiting checking and approval by the Faculty of Graduate Studies program assistants. Now, the time it takes for the checking approval to take place really varies depending on the volume of submissions being processed over at FGS. And as long as you made that initial submission before the deadline, that's fine. You've made that requirement for graduation. So if you don't hear from them for a couple of weeks and they say, hey, can you tweak this for us and resubmit, that's fine. You've still made that requirement for graduation.
And in regards to the PDF properties, did you want to talk to that one as well, Wendy?
Yeah, so one of the requirements for your PDF is to change the properties. And if you ever need help with that, you just shoot me an email. And if you're unable to change the properties, especially if you're using just like the Adobe Reader, again, you can just contact me and I can get that done for you in just a matter of minutes.
Great. And I noticed already in the question box that we have a couple of follow-up questions in regards to like PDF preparation and questions around PDFs. So we'll get to those very shortly. Okay, so ongoing on with our question and list. In regards to the timing of deposit in relation to graduation, so we ask that you direct your attention to the FGS submission information page for milestones. And yes, it is a graduation requirement. With regards to the steps to deposit and the supports, so deposit is self-directed and the onus is on the student to do that. Once your thesis is uploaded, the FGS program assistants will review and approve deposit. Wendy will provide assistance to both the program assistants and the students as required, and the technical issues, as Sean has indicated, is handled by him. If you have questions regarding the metadata or data curation regarding your thesis prior to submission, you're expected to seek librarian support. And the librarians that can provide assistance include your librarian liaison, myself, or Natalie Villefort. And Natalie is specific for data curation concerns. And I'm happy to talk a little bit more about that data curation. And for those of you that aren't aware or may be interested, Natalie and myself are giving a webinar on Monday on data curation. So that maybe if you're not really familiar with what that means or some assistance that way, if you attend the webinar on Monday, we'd be certainly happy to explore that topic further with you. And then finally on the screen, question regarding MSpace being the only choice for deposit and how is content in MSpace discovered. Yes, it is a condition for graduation, as we stated before. And no, there is no other choice. That is the recognized thesis deposit collection. Access to your thesis, however, can be made conditional in meeting other obligations, mandates, etc. And I'm happy to go into more detail about that if you're wondering. Just so that you're aware, and I believe this is addressed in the distribution license piece of the copyright statement that we didn't necessarily show, but MSpace collections are harvested, and what that means is indexed or crawled by Google Scholar, among other indexers. The thesis collection is also crawled or indexed by Library and Archives Canada and other thesis-specific harvesters. Unless, of course, it's embargoed or restricted. We can get into that as well. We are presently working towards optimizing indexing by OpenAIR. And I'll leave that at that in terms of OpenAIR, but if you have questions about what that is, happy to talk about that as well. Rolling on, plan to use content data from thesis for further research publication. What steps do you need to do this? So it depends on what you mean by content, and it depends what you mean by use. Regarding content, if you're meaning data, it depends on the form that takes and whether you needed REB approval or other data sharing arrangements as part of your research. And if, depending on the conditions of that, the data, then of course you need to account for it in terms of secondary use as part of your consent or your agreement. And if you did not obtain that, depending on the version of that data, you are then limited about what you can do with it. Also, you may also be restricted by IP, intellectual property, or prearranged publisher decisions. So if you're looking for more information about this or need remedy solutions, you can certainly contact me. What are my rights for publishing it as a monograph? What is the difference between a deposit and publication? So deposit is a form of publishing because of the indexing and discovery by third parties. So when you deposit, it is a form of distribution. So more and more deposit and publishing, traditional publishing or formal publishing means that you go through like a vetted process, i.e. peer review, and then if it's accepted, then it's copy editing and formatting and all those good things take place, and then is part of that distribution vehicle of that journal or publisher. So deposit is a little bit more less formal in that way, but it is available, as I said, to be discovered. And so for that reason, that's where publishing and deposit are the same. So if you have a reason to embargo your thesis, that means to put restriction, i.e. To not have the full text available, you can arrange with us to embargo the thesis up to 12 months as per the copyright agreement. And we've had some questions further about this, and we can certainly get into it a little bit more. Thesis can be set as private, non-discoverable after deposit, but we cannot retract, obviously, already indexed or cached versions that may be available by a third-party indexer. So what does this mean? So sometimes what's happened is, at the time that you submitted your thesis, you didn't have any commitments to other publishers or whatever. And then let's say you decide that you're going to engage with a particular publisher, and they say, well, hey, yeah, we're happy to publish your monograph, but we ask that essentially we have first rights for discovery of your material for a year. So that would mean that you would need to come back to us and say, after of course consulting with the faculty of graduate studies, and they say, sure, yes, you have the right to embargo your thesis for a year, we could then do that. However, if indexers such as Google Scholar have already indexed the thesis and has your thesis captured full text, we can't obviously then go back to Google Scholar and ask them to delete the cache version. So that is the only limit that we're talking about here. So what is the process for requesting an embargo on my thesis as part of the deposit stipulation? So Wendy very kindly put the answer to this question. So you can see that the steps of the student and their advisor should email the FGS program assistant for their subject area and the reason for the embargo. The program assistant will then get permission from the dean, and then assuming that they get that approval, they can then add their thesis to the restricted collection. So the program assistant or the student faculty, Wendy, did you just want to clarify this piece? They go back to you, and then you proceed to move the thesis into the restricted area of MSpace, correct?
Well, when you get permission from the dean, then when you go into MSpace to submit your thesis, you will select the restricted one-year collection rather than the public one when you're submitting.
And if it happens to be that the embargo is applied after that they've uploaded their thesis, and let's say it wasn't restricted at the time of the submission, but that embargo gets applied after the fact, then you will be requested to move it to the restricted collection, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Okay. And the final page of sort of the prepared questions is my thesis is in another language with some fields in English or multilingual. Does MSpace support multilingual metadata? So in general, some fields only support one entry. So example, primary title with a supporting field, such as the alternate title that you might have seen when Sean was giving the demonstration. In other fields, they are repeatable, but with the limitation that there's only 6 entries, like for example, the keyword. So there's sort of, that's pretty much what we can say about multilingual support in terms of MSpace. Does my thesis get cataloged, or how do I improve discovery description? The student is responsible for providing adequate descriptors. Some of this is an expectation of the submission intake form, so exactly how Sean sort of walked you through. There is no cataloging support for thesis. So the expectation is you are prepared with the appropriate descriptive metadata prior to the submission. So again, really encourage you to reach out to your liaison librarian prior to submission to ensure that you have that information on hand when you're submitting your thesis. And then finally, we've gotten a few requests for how do I cite my thesis in my future research. So best practice always is that you're using a citation manager for assistance, as the citation elements are determined by the style that you're using. But as a general rubric, provided below in black here, author, surname, first initial, year, title, level of thesis. So you would put master's thesis or PhD thesis or BSc thesis, or undergraduate capstone, whatever, University of Manitoba, Winnipeg, and then the availability statement. So available, colon, MSpace thesis collection, and then putting the link. So there is a format distinction depending on whether your thesis is published or unpublished. So this would not necessarily, of course, apply to MSpace deposited theses, as that is considered published. However, if you wish to refer to your thesis prior to MSpace submission, then the citation would be everything up until and including the availability statement, and then indicating the title with a single quotes around the title. Okay, at this time, we're going to sort of open the forum, and we're first going to, we have quite a long list of questions, which is awesome. So we're going to start off with the first one, Wendy. William has a question in regards to, I am looking at creating a landscaped horizontal document that is 11 by 17 as a PDF. Is that a problem?
No, that shouldn't be a problem. And any details when you're submitting your thesis, especially for those of you in architecture, you can definitely shoot me an email, and we can look at the details. But absolutely, and we have many architecture, landscape architecture theses that are have very specific formats. So definitely get in contact with me, and we can make sure that this gets on MSpace properly.
Great. So if you have further questions, William, certainly you can follow up with us now. If you want to raise your hand, then that way we can know that you're, and then we can certainly turn your mic on if you wish. Is there a place, FGS profile, where researchers' ORCID can be loaded before you're ready for MSpace? So that's, I think, a question for both me and Sean, but in terms of loaded before you're ready for MSpace, so if you're found, you may be found in MSpace if you have other publications deposited in MSpace where you provided your ORCID number, or ORCID can be harvested through other means. I'm not going to get into that. In terms of the FGS profile, in particular for Orcid, that would be a question to FGS. I can't answer that. We can certainly try, and that could be a question to be added to the list to the Faculty of Graduate Studies to answer whether they have some mechanism to sort of track or receive or submit ORCIDs as part of a thesis submission. And of course that goes for not just the candidate, but also for advisors. Because ORCID is a nice discovery tool for everyone, not just the student, but also for the advisors that provided assistance to that thesis. Okay. In what circumstance does one choose the one-year embargo? That can be very tricky, but what I could say is that could be dependent on many different things. It could be on publisher request. They're looking for sort of first rights for discovery or a publication as part of the being accepted by the publisher to publish with them. There may be other reasons why embargo, for example, it's usually just around publication. If you're choosing to publish your thesis as a book, and they're looking again for that sort of first right for distribution.
And in some cases, some people would like to patent their work.
Yes, absolutely. So intellectual property. And so they're wishing to protect that intellectual property through patent and are anticipating that the patent will be, that will be enough time to get a patent. And so you embargo your thesis so that patent goes through, and then you can then release your thesis with that patent protection. Thank you very much, Wendy. Can you explain what is meant by the distribution license? So I don't have it up in front of me right now, but in general, what you're doing is you're giving, as I explained about how MSpace is harvested by third-party indexers such as Google Scholar and OpenAir in the future and others. This just makes it clear to you that MSpace, you are giving rights to MSpace that you understand that MSpace is just distributing your work in that way, and that you're giving those permissions. There are other access options other than just sort of open or restricted, or are open and embargo. And if you want, I can get into those, but this is particular also to FGS rights, and so I don't want to sort of go into that too much. But that's what it's meant by the distribution license. Next question. If the thesis contains chapters that were published in a peer-reviewed journals, do I need to indicate that in the MSpace portal anywhere? And do I need to indicate in a separate form that I have the copyright permission? My thesis already includes a copyright statement for my published chapters. If your thesis is reproducing in whole or in part chapters published in a peer-reviewed journal, and that you have the copyright permission, then I think as long as that copyright permission is somewhere referenced in your thesis, then I think that's fine. Essentially, you have to show that you've shown that you've done due diligence in terms of copyright. And then when you're signing off in your copyright statement, that's what you're certifying, is that yes, you have undertaken the appropriate steps to secure any copyright permissions that you require. So I hope I interpreted that question correctly, but if I haven't, please let me know either in the question box or put your hand up, and we'll be happy to explore that further. Next question. If I do my oral exam by the first week of December and submit my thesis by the end of December, do I have to register for winter 2021? That is a process question, and you need to contact your program assistant. Next question. As the primary author, are you allowed to place on ResearchGate? So, ResearchGate is not a repository. It is not a publisher. It is a what I would describe as the Facebook for researchers. It is not recognized by publishers, in fact, actively discouraged by publishers as a forum for distribution, especially if you have signed a copyright transfer agreement stipulating that you can only deposit a version of your manuscript, otherwise known as accepted manuscript version, in either a repository such as MSpace or your personal web page. So that does not include ResearchGate. So in terms of your thesis, presuming that there's no embargo, I think I would need to look at more carefully the stipulations under the distribution license for thesis. And that would need sort of some more discussion, I think, between Althea Wheeler, which is the copyright manager for the University of Manitoba, and myself, to maybe just to be absolutely clear before I say anything more about that. Certainly, I know ResearchGate definitely promotes that you put your full text version there, but you don't have to. You can put the link if you've made your thesis available in ResearchGate and direct people that may be finding you on ResearchGate to the MSpace record. So that's the best as I can answer that right now. I hope that's okay. What is REB approval? REB stands for Research Ethics Board. So for those of you who are doing human ethics approved research as part of your thesis, you will have gone through Research Ethics Board. And so anything that you've stated there in terms of how you're planning to handle the aspects of your research has gone sort of through the data management discussion. That anything you do, of course, has been stipulated and approved there, so you, of course, are expected to follow through on what you stated is part of your ethics approval, ethics protocol. Okay, next question. For students that have done a paper-based thesis with several publications, some already published and others under submission, can I still deposit without embargo? So I'm just going to read this again because I want to think this through a little bit. So for students that have done a paper-based thesis with several publications and others still under submission, can I still deposit without embargo? I think I'm going to need to get a little bit more context, Vanessa. So,
hello, can you hear me?
hi, I can.
Okay, sounds good. I thought, oh, do I just have to type everything out or can I just talk? Okay, yeah, no, I've done a paper-based thesis, and one of the papers was accepted under a Creative Commons license, so I think that one is acceptable, but I actually went and looked at the second publication, and granted, some of that publication was modified under peer review. So the one that appears in the actual, that will appear in the actual dissertation that I'll submit to MSpace is not the actual, is not the article. It has been modified, right, with the criteria required by the peer reviewers. So I just don't know if I can. I don't know if I can deposit it to MSpace. I do know that it, for the one that has been published, but there's been modifications with peer review, they do say that if it's published in its in its printed form, it would need an embargo. But I just don't know if it does in this case, for example.
Okay, so now I understand. So this is the kind of question that I field. So essentially what you're asking is, I'm not really clear which version is the version of record acceptable for essentially green deposit, or what is to be embargoed versus what is allowed to be sort of open access. Happy to consult with you sort of offline. Vanessa, so if you want to reach out to me an email, I should say to everyone that at the end of this presentation, there is contact information for both me and Wendy. And so, and this recording will also be available through the YouTube. So you can certainly reach out to me, and I'll be happy to sort of read through, you know, what version of record you're looking at versus, you know, what, you know, the publisher is stipulating in terms of embargo, and we can help you make that decision. So I hope that answers your question. Does it?
Sounds good. Yeah, I'll touch base with you afterwards. Thank you.
Perfect. Next question. What exactly is a monograph? That is library speak, unfortunately, for book. Or a book chapter. Monograph or book. Monograph is a little bit more expansive than book, I guess, but that yes, sorry, we dropped into library lingo there, William, so sorry about that. So that's okay. Yes, there's a question about, I could see an embargo for an industry project under my tax. So again, that kind of goes back to intellectual property or any kinds of mandates that you might have that would be restricting your thesis or thesis publication. So just, again, you have to be cognizant of what other things are potentially influencing your right to distribute or access rights that would be have to be imposed on your thesis. So if you have any questions about what that would be, we're certainly happy to be able to help you field that. Next question, my thesis uses APA style. What will happen when it is reviewed by a library editor and she requires me to change some details of style in my thesis? I'm not sure what you mean by library editor, but I'm assuming, and again, this is more of a program assistant type question because this is more process, but it is my understanding after the committee, you know, you go through your defense, you may be asked to make some changes, and that may include editorial changes and other, you know, less typos, all those good things prior to submitting to FGS for approval. So I think that's sort of what can be addressed there.
And just to add, Andrea,
Yes.
if it's rejected, they don't have to resubmit. The rejection will make their submission show up in their MSpace activities list. So they would access their existing submission, remove the file, and re-add the amended file, and then complete the submission so it goes back to the for review.
And I have, Brenda has kindly, Brenda's one of the program assistants who has offered to jump in here, so I'm just going to unmute her. And hi, Brenda.
Hello. I can answer quite a few of these questions. So if the people are actually online, they don't have to wait until the presentation is over and then either contact either the libraries or FGS, because hopefully I remember them all. For the first one, that I believe it was Oracle, something like that. I'm sorry, I don't remember the name.
Orcid.
Okay. FGS does not, this is the first time I've ever heard of it, so we never really look for that type of stuff and publications unless we get to the point where people are actually looking for external examiners. Then we will look towards the publications at that point. But that is far as the programs area goes. In regards to, do I need to register if I plan on graduating? If you're registered for the fall 2020 term, you defend your thesis at the beginning of December, and then you submit your thesis that's been approved by your committee and your advisor before the January deadline. So if you do it by December 31st, you will not need to register nor pay fees for the winter 2021 term. However, if you do not make that date, then yes, you will need to register and pay fees for the winter 2021 term. I would also suggest for, I believe the lady's name was Vanessa, that maybe as a potentially you want to maybe ask for a 1-year restriction, because at this point you may wish to publish those other papers, or the publisher may want first rights to it. So that's what I would suggest, is just asking for it. It's better being safe than sorry, because as was presented in this slide, that if you upload, we accept it, it goes out onto the internet, and then we don't know what's cached after that. And it seems I've had a couple of requests lately that students, after we've accepted and committed it to archives, that they've wanted restrictions, but we can't answer or can't take back caches. This question, I'm sorry, I've talked too long. I forgot what it was about already.
API style.
Towards the also, should I put an embargo? I would say it never hurts.
And in regards to APA style, what happens when it's reviewed by, I'm not sure what they mean by library editor, and requires maybe change style?
I'm assuming that that question is actually for the program assistants, being the library editor, probably, like Sean was starting to say. That if we find anything incorrect, i.e. the thesis title page, because we are trying to go to one title page and we do have a sample on our website, or if we notice that there's some more things like signatures or cell phone numbers, we will reject a thesis and ask corrections to be made. And then, as Sean pointed out, they can just exchange the document that they've already uploaded.
Okay, great. And I think there might be one further question that you might be able to answer, Brenda. When Vanessa speaks of paper-based thesis, is this the same as sandwich thesis? Chapters are 95% formatted as journal articles.
Yeah, sandwich thesis, manuscript thesis, major paper, they've all got the same name, basically.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you very much. Couple more questions. Can you say a few words about Open Air? So Open Air is a initiative by Europe in support of open initiatives, open science initiatives. As you may or may not be aware, there's a major open science campaign in Europe led by funders and government, European Union, European Commission, to ensure that research published, produced in Europe is publicly available at all possible. And so Open Air is the initiative to support that mandate. So it's a federation of various institutions in Europe to essentially create a discovery for open science. It's a worldwide initiative, but largely first focus is in Europe. And so Canadian research, in particular, Trajancy is very interested in seeing if they can get an accurate picture of Canadian research through the Open Air discovery stream. And so this is why we are interested in making sure that our thesis produced by students at the University of Manitoba, as well as researchers at the University of Manitoba, are sort of discovered through Open Air. So the contact information, happy to send as a follow-up email. And as I said, the recording will be available on our YouTube channel. And I think William wanted to talk, so I'm going to actually just sort of turn his mic on if he wants to.
Can you hear me, Sarah?
I certainly can.
All right, cool. So as part of UMGSA executive and as a researcher, I heard a lot of issues around that embargo, and it was quite amorphous, right? And the copyright, and I know Grad Steps has a whole section on copyright, and that's useful. But when you're already at the stage of starting to get into the MSpace, and people still have all these questions about embargo, that has to be several months ahead of schedule. So there needs to be a gate, whether through FGS or through the advisor, about that concept. And I bet you any money, my gut's saying that if I straw polled the advisors across campus, I bet you 80% won't understand what this concept of embargo would be. So I just want, as I alluded to in our previous correspondence, UMGSA would be happy to help out creating an FAQ. And I'm encouraged by all these questions, but I'm also discouraged by the fact that there's so many questions around something that advisors really say, well, that's just your last step. Don't worry about it. Like there's a lot of stuff that we talked about today. And I think that there needs to be probably better messaging somehow, and again, maybe different levels. So that's my observation as a senator and an executive.
Well, I can only say that I think myself and Althea Wheeler have given a few sort of online webinars regarding copyright and various issues and aspects around copyright and Creative Commons. But we certainly take your point that maybe making this a little bit more directed to graduate students would be key. And one thing that we would love is to be invited in, maybe through FGS, maybe through the individual faculties, and sort of engaging more specifically on data related or thesis related outputs and how those pertain to sort of copyright and other sort of mandates that may sort of impact access as you're thinking about it towards the end part, which is the submission piece. So maybe myself and Brenda could talk about how we could make that happen in terms of getting more in front of graduate students in a place where they'd be willing to listen to us, and so that we can better prepare everyone.
No, absolutely. And I'm really under the opinion, and especially with my international student colleagues, the library services and the grad steps, all that great stuff out there, unless you're actively looking for information and being an active student, a lot of those are hidden gems. As simple as that. And people may be doing way more work than they have to without being engaged. And that's why I'll be talking about this, because I serve on the co-curriculum record committee for Senate as well. These are all tied together. So I really appreciate today's session.
Well, great. And I think that's a really nice way to end this session. So please, please feel free to share this recording with all of your grad student colleagues, and so we can again try and get the word out. And again, if you're not familiar with the upcoming webinars regarding data curation, and things like that, really encourage you to register for those. And on that note, if there's not any further questions, I think we're going to say goodbye. So here's our contact information. I didn't put my email here, but all of us, of course, can be reached by our first last names followed by at umanitoba.ca. And thank you very much for attending.